We're here on your internet again for Walk It Off. Not on your radio dial, but just on your internet, your streams, and video. We're in the future, baby.
If we're just on the internet, that makes this an internet exclusive. So, walk it off, video, audio, all in one. This is the full package.
So fancy.
It is pretty fancy. I'm pretty impressed with us that we can pull this off without a watermark this time. And by we, I mean...
I'm taking your word for it. So we'll see how that goes.
I'll put the caveat out there first, or just to be clear with all of our lovely listeners and fans and friends and family and everybody. That was my fault. We had a really great show. We recorded it, and we recorded it with a watermark, and there was no way of getting rid of that. So the content was that damn good, though, that it was worth putting out there with a watermark on it. So pat on the back to us that we were able to do that.
Yeah, you can still go check it out. It's still up there on
Absolutely.
the website, right? WalkItOffRadio.com.
It is.
Where you can find all our interesting things. And look at this. Just chill hangs.
Doesn't get much better than this, man. It really doesn't. We are in COVID times where we spend a lot of time at home. I know you are able to go into the studio, usually at least, when weather and COVID protocols permit. I have not been there in a very long time, and I miss it a ton. So experiences like this really fill a big hole in my heart where I can't be there standing across the room from you talking to you like this. Normally on Sunday nights, I can't look you in the eyes. We can't get this kind of rapport. So this is just beyond just being a cool way of doing the show. This is just ideal for me. This is just so much fun. It's something I look forward to, and I absolutely love doing.
Yeah, buddy. It brings us back to that two-man booth. And it is a little bit difficult. You do a great job calling in and hosting the show from the phone lines, but it is a different animal. It's a bit harder when we're not in the same studio. We can't play off each other's cues as easily. So you just tee it up, you knock it out of the park, and we keep the show going every Sunday night on WXNA. But now we got this too, so we can have some little video hangs and talk about issues that we didn't get to fit into the show, because there's never any issues that we don't get to fit in the show, right?
No, 1 hour is always enough for us, and we always have it wrapped up by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday night. And 1 week of sports is enough to go through in an hour. No, that never happens. And we always have tangents. When we started this, Drew, when we first kicked this off, when you first brought the idea to me, you were inspired. We used to go hang out and have burgers and beers on a Friday night, which I miss immensely also, being 1,000 miles away from you. But
remember those times? Going to a bar, throwing some darts,
man,
bullshitting about sports?
Having a sweet potato stout at Tennessee Brew Works. Those beers are incredible, and those are really some of the best times. And that's where we decided we have pretty darn good sports barroom banter. So let's translate that to the radio. So when you do that, though, that means you never know exactly where you're going to go. And that makes an hour disappear really quickly in the good kind of way. Like, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, we hope it is for everybody out there listening too. It makes that hour seem real short. But that's the good part. That's the whole, like you said, man, that's the whole point. That was the whole pitch when we wanted to bring our radio experience and our audiovisual experience to a sports talk format, which was what we were doing anyways on our weekends, going to sports games.
That's true.
Talking about the stuff, getting in there, using our hard-earned knowledge and connections to have some beers and talk about sports.
Yeah, it really didn't cut into
so
our
many
lives
shows
at
out
all.
There
yeah,
that are just like, that's the sports media landscape right now. We're not trying to compete there. We're not trying to break news. That's not. If you're coming here for the latest breaking news, that's not what it's about. If you're coming here we're not selling out to get those takes by being like, hey Dave, did you know LeBron's actually bad at basketball?
He's just built
And
different.
then it'll be like, hey, did you hear what this guy said about LeBron? No, no takes.
I, I don't think
No
either of
breaking
us could
news.
even attempt
Just having
a
fun
Stephen
talking
A.
sports.
Smith impression, much less create a whole radio show about that kind of fervor. Now, there's a time and a place for a guy like that, and I respect Stephen A. A lot as a reporter and somebody who is very close to the game and has oftentimes some really thoughtful opinions. But I think they're masked by the hyperbole that that is almost required to put on that spin. And so I'm glad we kind of went through our manifesto, so to speak. It's something we don't talk about on the air that often, at least in depth right there. But now that we're coming to y'all with this video and these new takes, I think it's really important to talk about what our intent is. And we aim to be wholly unique in the sports landscape, just like you said. This is something that everybody hopefully should and can relate to, because this is how the majority of people talk about sports. This is how I've always talked to my friends about sports. How I've always engaged about that at every fantasy football draft I've been to, at every bar I've gone to watch a playoff game, every time I've been at your house for Super Bowl. This is the kind of atmosphere that it is. So I think personally, I think we've done a good job of bringing that. But I certainly want to say that if folks have feedback or if they have ideas on how we can fit that mold even better, that's certainly our mission and what we love to do. So we love hearing from y'all at Walk It Off Radio, walkitoffradio.com. We're accessible and we're here.
Absolutely. You got a long form thing you want to ask us? Anytime. walkitoffradio@gmail.com. Questions, comments, topics you want us to talk about on the show, things we can't miss. Just like we said, it's a weekly show. So we get to recap. We get to get you up to speed on what's going on and what might be coming up in the next week. And hopefully do it in an entertaining way. We got a couple of taglines. Everything you need to know for your week around the water cooler. It's just like hanging out with your friends at a sports bar, if your friends knew what the hell they were talking about.
And most of them
That's how we
probably
describe it.
Yeah. Yep, and it's fun. That's what makes it fun. And now we get to talk about things that aren't covering the full week, because we're coming to you on a what is it? Is it Tuesday night?
Still.
Can't believe it.
And we get to say an occasional bad word here because we're not on the radio waves with your FCC content, and we can drink a beer while we do it. So, good hangs, buddy. Good
Cheers.
to see you.
Here's to you, my man.
Virtually.
That certainly
What you got there
does
tonight, by the way.
make it more like a barroom banter. So,
You just bring the fancy stuff out. You showed me up on these first couple video episodes.
well, I've told you, I'm a big fan of the Sequench. So we could also make Walk It Off a whole beer talk show as well, because half of what we talk about when we're preparing for this show is about the beers that we're drinking while we're preparing it and what we have in our fridges. But I love the Sequench that you're drinking. I think it's one of the more creative and unique beers out there. But I broke into my beer cellar for this special occasion and brought out this nice little Nine Ladies Dancing from the brewery. It is a nice kind of strong ale with cacao nibs, vanilla, coffee, and lactose added to it. So it's a nice little late night treat. It's probably a few years old. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm going to guess this is a beer
A
from
cellared beer.
2017, something like that. So
All right.
it's nice.
You were actually the one who got me into sours back in the day. Take a little bit of a risk. And yeah, the Sequench from Dogfish Heads, one of my favorites. It's kind of a light, easily drinkable sour.
It is. I always recommend those gozos.
An intro
too.
sour.
There's no doubt about it. And a sessionable sour, like that's a really big buzz term right now, and it's really nice because, especially as you become an old man like I do every day, I don't want to get really toasty every night. I don't want to do that, even if I'm going to the lake or the beach or a sporting event. I don't necessarily want to get to the point that I did when I was in college or whatnot. So the beers that
Time
are
and a place.
sessionable like that, exactly. Beers that are sessionable like that, low ABV, but are really flavorful. those are the ones that I migrate towards. So I love Sea Quench because of that. It's a really nice beer.
But sometimes you need something a little bit stronger, like, when you're a Preds fan
Yeah, that's
this season.
That's a whiskey and probably a pint of beer that you're crying into at the same time.
Almost had a win tonight. We're coming onto the air right after the Preds game
Horseshoes
got
and hand
over.
grenades.
Yeah, made it to overtime. What do you know? But another blown lead. And that bad news before the game, of course, kind of surprising us that Roman Yossi's going to be out for at least week to week. Adding to this laundry list, man, for the Preds right now, in this already rough season. Like, if the fans were calling for David Poyle and John Hines to start playing the young guys and being kind of surprised why that wasn't happening yet with the season slipping away, it's out of their hands now. You got to play the young guys. Just Yossi's on IR right now, your captain. He's adding to Ryan Ellis, his usual D partners, on IR right now. Matt Duchene hit IR. UC Saros is on IR. Luke Cunning's on IR. It's not a good spot right now for the Preds, but hey, they hung tough.
Yeah.
Almost beat the Canes tonight. That's what we're celebrating nowadays. Fucking 1 point in overtime.
I know. And I mean, clearly based on the last win, it would have been really nice to have Rojo in that lineup because he knows how to do that in overtime. That was a sweet move in the last game.
Oh,
but
that shootout winner. Yeah, that was beautiful.
It
With
really
the
was.
blood on his face from the high stick that wasn't called, that
That's
presumably did something, is involved in the injury. Hey, let's tangent already. How does hockey get away with upper body and lower body as the only descriptors for injuries?
because that's
No other sport does that.
that's a really great point. Now, I mean, I guess the question to your question is that better, or do we want the specificity? Sometimes
I'm on record as hating the trend of just describing an injury by the body part. Announcers on the air saying he's out with a hamstring just infuriates me. Everybody's got a hamstring.
yeah, I know.
What do you do to the hamstring?
My hamstring is always
Terrible
bothering me.
phrasing.
It's always there. Yeah. If you don't have a hamstring, that's when you really have a problem. But yeah, I agree. I think I'd almost rather, this kind of goes back to the manifesto we were talking about earlier, is there's way too much time, I think, spent dissecting the specificities of an injury. There's value to it, especially in fantasy football and things like that, because you want to predict when fantasy, any sport, not just football, but you want to be able to predict with some expert help potentially when they could come back and what impact that might have on your team. But beyond that, I don't think it brings much value. I'd rather just kind of know that they're injured and generally where it is, because then you kind of know how it's going to affect their game. I don't know. It's a hard one, but I don't know if it adds much value to us as fans or even sports commentators.
Is that how they get away with it? That fantasy hockey's not all that popular in comparison to the other sports?
Dude,
Because you're exactly right. The NFL, we've seen now leveling punishments out to coaching staffs, to organizations, the Patriots, who aren't honest with injuries, because fantasy's a billion-dollar industry now. And that's one of the main reasons it's there. People need to know this information. But the story in hockey's always been you're getting hit all the time. You don't want your opponents to have something to target. Maybe that's a concern. You can't really use that if football's not doing it either. And again, it's just bizarre when you see someone, obviously a concussion, like with that terrible hit by Tom Wilson the other night against Brandon Carlo of the Bruins. It's incredibly obvious that he's out with a concussion, and they'll call it an upper body injury. Roman Josi takes a high stick to the face, an upper body injury. Someone can get bored and break their clavicle. It's an upper body injury. So I don't know. It's annoyingly vague.
It is, and there's some. I mean, first off, yes, you're right about fantasy football. Follow the money, and if there is a reason for them to change that monetarily, they will. And clearly, there isn't right now. There's probably going to be some pressure on them to report a lot more specificity around brain injuries and concussions. I'm really surprised that that's not required more now, especially for posterity's sake. And maybe they have more for that, but you want to be able to look backwards and say, did whatever ailment that a retired player or whomever else is experiencing now, could it have been caused by a specific type of injury? And if you're too vague, you can't figure that out. Now, I personally don't know if the NHL does keep those records. They just don't report out normally.
Oh, they have to. They absolutely have to. And we see this come up every now and then when a player retires. Eric Lindros, obviously, concussions cut his career short. Corey Crawford, that was probably a huge part of his deciding to retire on the verge of this season. But then you've got Marian Hossa, who had to retire because of a skin condition that came out later.
Yeah.
But then you got guys like Brent Seabrook, who just announced his retirement this week. Never-ending litany of lower body injuries.
That's such a weird. Why? I honestly don't know that story. I don't know if we know a little bit more of why. Has he come out and said anything? Because that is really hard to see somebody who is pushed out of the game, and you just don't have an indication of it. But maybe that's the mystery of hockey too, because hockey is. It's kind of Bill Belichick's type game, honestly. You talk about the Patriots, like it's just it is the ultimate tough guy. It's the final score and that's it, kind of a game. Maybe it just matches the tone of the sport.
Yeah, you see these tough guys who get their leg broken on a slap shot and finish out their shift. One skate in the air.
I can't believe it. I think the only exception is when somebody's face gets cut by a skate, which is really weird stuff. But I know.
Oh man, don't bring those back.
I'm sorry, but they're anomalies for a sport that's so violent. It is. I guess it is dominated by injuries, but it's they're so minimal compared to everything else. It's taken on such a different world of its own, but it's what I imagine football was back in the early Super Bowl era and beyond that. And I can't know because I wasn't there, but and the only variable, the only difference is that football is gigantic and hockey isn't as big right now, at least in the U.S. And the U.S. is a torchbearer. The U.S. sets the standard in a lot of ways. So I don't know how to explain it, but
the NHL just signed a new deal with ESPN, so for upcoming seasons, maybe the worldwide leader will request a little bit more clarity for their sideline reporters.
It's all about who has the clout, and you'd imagine that it follows there. But we've seen a lot of growth in hockey. We've seen a lot of contracts signed, and that hasn't changed. So I don't know if there's a tipping point anytime soon that I can predict. We might as well just drink beer. That's what it's little known, but athletic trainers for hockey teams, the first thing they do after they diagnose an injury is give them a Labatt's Blue. That's sorry. It's
oh man, if you're giving me a baddie, it better be a Wildcat.
But that's the tone of the sport. Clearly that was a joke, but there's something still renegade about hockey, and I think it's what we love about it. I think it's what makes it fit a mid-market team like Nashville too. It's not the polished sport that the NBA is at this point. If you hold up the NBA relative to college basketball, it's an entirely different game. And I know many people have dropped off as fans of the NBA over the last 10, 15 years because of the direction of the style of play and the way that they call fouls and the way that they don't call fouls. And it's just taken on a different persona that college basketball still has.
Finally.
It totally is. And the NFL's not far from that for good reason, because the NFL was literally ruining lives with the injuries and the style of play. So they needed to address those injuries. but it's changed. It's changed it, and of course the popularity changes it as well. It brings a lot more heat and speculation and skepticism and criticism of everything that they're doing. And hockey just isn't there. It's kind of wild, wild west still, relatively speaking. And again, I think that's what fits Nashville a lot and allows a market like that to thrive so much.
How much of that is just the media? And the fact that, I mean, hockey Twitter is just as fun as baseball Twitter, is just as fun as NBA Twitter. You've got your diehards everywhere. You've got millions of fans across the world. But there doesn't seem to be that same laser focus as far as just the media goes. And it's shoved in front of your face every 5 seconds. Yeah. Maybe that'll change with a nice big fat ESPN contract on that next TV deal. But, we'll see. You'll always have your fans. You'll always have everybody to talk about. And here in Nashville, we got the Preds. And we've been so spoiled with this run of greatness now for going on 15 years. It's tough to have a season like this. But, hey, again, you want to check out the young guys. You want to see a little bit of silver linings. We talk about Eeli Tolvanen finally breaking through, becoming a regular, solidifying his lineup spot.
A silver lining this season for sure. Yeah. Does that make it? My question in a situation like this is, does it make it better? Is it better? Is it more digestible when all these players are injured? Essentially, when there's little hope, because we debated weeks ago whether the Predators were a bad team when they were generally healthy. They weren't fully healthy, but when they were generally healthy. And that's heartbreaking to think of. But now you can kind of expedite your acceptance of that by just saying, well, everybody's injured. The record is not, we can't catch up necessarily. I mean, anything's doable, I guess, at this point, but it's really difficult. So as a fan, which is, you and I look at that perspective a lot, not just what would a GM do or what should a team look like, but like as a fan, do you feel better about that now that all these guys are injured and now you can hang your hat on Eeli Tolvanen making an impact finally and say, wow, if everybody was back next season and John Hines found his footing, we'd have a really good team.
Well, John Hines might not get a chance to find his footing before next season.
That's fair.
The way things are going for the Preds. But, yeah, as a fan, we've talked about this on the show before, but fans are so much more knowledgeable now. Because I know just a minute ago I was talking about how the media doesn't laser focus on the NHL, but that doesn't mean it's not there. It just means you got to look a little bit harder for it. And any diehard fans has access to all the information. You can have the scouting reports of guys who are playing in the CHL, the KHL, wherever they are. You know the prospects now. That's such a big change in modern sports, is that fans have this knowledge base. They're crazy about prospects. It gives them a lot more cultural cachet when they're talking about making trades. And it gives you a lot more patience with your team during down seasons, too. Because you can always dream on draft picks, on high draft picks, of saying, okay, this is how we're going to rebuild. We're going to add to our team with a lot of young talent that we might not have had a chance to have if we didn't have this one bad season. There's a lot of really interesting change in the way that fans look at their teams right now and can stomach losing, I think, a lot better. And it's also kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card for the organization of this recent string of injuries.
It is. That's such fascinating, psychological manipulation. I mean, certainly you and I know it really well, being outside of Nashville, which has been a really great market to be a fan of recently, being fans of pretty terrible teams. And so
historically,
but it being from New York and Phoenix, Drew, Dave, respectively, we've chosen.
The Islanders are in first place.
That's true. The Islanders and the Knicks are really showing up for you right now. But
I'm not going to buy into that one yet.
I wouldn't either. But that's part of what comes along with it, is cautious optimism. But we've certainly practiced that a ton, and it's amazing. Like I was thinking about this just the other day, thinking about everybody's friend, Robert Sarver, who's the owner of the Phoenix Suns. Probably the most unliked owner in all of the NBA. 2 years ago, a big expose.
You're talking to a guy whose team is owned by James Dolan?
Okay. The second, literally, they're both right there, almost neck and neck. And he had like two interim co-GMs. It was a cluster. Like, and there was a whole expose.
What Donald Sterling had to do to get past them on the hated chart.
I know. And that's another sad point is just that we hate ineptitude sometimes more than we hate shitty people. But
sorry to step on your point for a second, but you got me.
It's a good point.
Tangenting off right here. What teams really like their owner? It's just when they're new, when they're in the grace period, right? I mean, you're talking to somebody right now who owns multiple Steve Cohen shirts. Thinking about the excitement that sale brought to the Mets this offseason.
True.
But then after not signing any of the big free agents, not having that extension yet with Lindor or Conforto, even that's worn off a little bit. You saw he was sort of chased off of Twitter due to the whole GameStop thing, but that's all different. But yeah, what teams like their owner? For the most part, owners are blamed for not spending their money, are blamed for all these ridiculous rules and lockdowns that they try to get the players to do to get more money.
True. And to the general inequities of the sport. Yeah.
Crying poverty. It's like, you own a professional sports franchise. You have absolutely everybody here cannot even relate to you on a monetary level. You can't be saying, "Oh, this deal is too bad for us. We gotta shut down baseball for a year because we're not getting enough of the revenues."
Yeah.
Nobody feels sorry for the owners.
Well, that's why there's revolving doors on GMs. I mean, the best owners hire good GMs and fire bad GMs as quickly as they can, because that passes the buck really easily. And that's where Robert Sarver really screwed up. Is he was putting his face out there. He was in a weird spot with negotiating a new arena amidst the worst stretch for the Suns. And he wasn't putting the right leadership in to blame it on, which is what owners do. So he wasn't even a good bad
scapegoats.
He wasn't even a good bad owner. And now here he is leading a team that is second place in the West, the second best record in the NBA, and has done something that we really haven't seen since Golden State and OKC, where it's almost purely organic, with the exception of Chris Paul coming over. It's really, really a unique team, and it's really fun to see. And he's like, he posted a great picture. I don't know if it was on his Twitter or not, but he had his shirt ripped open wearing DeAndre Ayton's chain after they beat LA, which, by the way, beating LA is enough to make you a saint in Phoenix land. But the point I'm trying to get to, and sorry it's so roundabout, but is that he can do that stuff now, and he feels like he's king of the world. But he's a really shitty owner. He has been horrible. He's been horrible for the sport. He's been horrible for the league. He's been horrible for the fans here. And here we are celebrating him. And that is something that I don't love, but I also forgive and get, because that is what comes along with being a fan, not just a commentator like we are. We're commentators. We talk about it on the radio. We love talking about sports, but we're fans also, which means that we're subject to feeling that way. And, I can't say I love Robert Sarver, but he made decisions and he gave liberties to people that created one of the more fun teams in the league now. And it's amazing how how your mind can get manipulated like that, because they do that all the time. And it's kind of,
winning fixes everything.
That's exactly right. It's what it all comes down to.
It's often said because it's true. You forgive everything when your team's winning.
That's it.
I mean, who gets let back into the league after their suspensions run out? Guys who can help you win. That's the contract we signed up for as sports fans. We know on an intellectual level that everybody who's rich enough to be a sports owner is probably a terrible person. And a lot of them pan out for us. We see Donald Sterling and Jerry Richardson. We see Jerry Jones jacking up the prices during an energy crisis in Texas. You know, these guys didn't get to the position they are by not making money ruthlessly at every possible step they can.
True.
Every now and then you get someone who's actually relatable and you can cheer for, like Mark Cuban at times.
Yeah.
That new guy who just bought the Utah Jazz seems pretty likable so far. Even Steve Ballmer, you know, his excitement when he first bought the Clips was infectious. And
Yeah.
turning the team around, I mean, that's going to grant you a whole lot of leeway with the fans, that's for sure.
Especially relative to where the team was. If I was an owner that was, or if I was a potential owner, if I was a super rich individual, I would be looking at the worst team in the entire league. I'd be looking at the Clips. I'd be looking at the Bucks, you know, where they were years ago. I'd be looking at, I mean, there's so many teams that are just really bad. I'll be looking at the Florida Marlins, you know, the Miami Marlins. There's nothing but upside there to go and take them. And the good news is the bar's set low. So all you got to do is make it look like you've done some functional things to clean house to set you up for winning in 10 years, because you're not getting fired. And that's why to your point, nobody likes their owner, because an owner can't be fired. An owner is ultimately to blame for everything. And frankly, that's something that I think sports has gotten right, is we've realized that, yeah, the owner really is to blame, although we accept them passing the buck all the time. This is a great conversation, man. It's something that we don't get into that often, but owners are really horrible, and they you know, I guess the last point I'd make on that, just to emphasize that point, is you mentioned Donald Sterling and some of the really crappy things that we've heard. Well, anytime that stuff boils to the top, that's just a small percentage of what's really, really happening. And that's not to accuse all the owners of those specific things, but you're right, they're ruthless. They've cut corners, they've exploited, they've taken advantage of people. And we know, just based on the inequities of the sports, monetarily and otherwise, that they take advantage of the players. They absolutely do.
And the fans in the cities, you know, you can just look at every team that's ever moved and left behind a devastated fan base. And every team that hasn't moved only because a city acceded to their ridiculous demands for a new stadium. That's become a drain on the community.
Yep.
Or you got a new parking lot out of the old stadium. Yeah, but look, we prefer to talk about the things we love about sports than the things you don't love, because that's a deep, dark rabbit hole that is unfortunately a huge part of any sports fandom now. Is, again, we have all this information. We can't just plead ignorance and say, oh yeah, maybe I read in the newspaper or something that Marge Schott said, but you know, I didn't really hear it. I forgot. I didn't read the article that day. No, now it's on 24/7. You're not going to miss that.
It's forced in front of your face. You're right. You can't plead ignorance. Yeah, you absolutely can't. And that's our obligation. I mean, as fans, and I know it's a responsibility some of us might want to shirk, and I get it, but that contract you're talking about with the NHL, with the ESPN, that doesn't exist without us watching. It doesn't exist without us playing into what they're doing. So as hard as it may be, it's just really important to understand that we do wield some power there in terms of, because
and the
now,
bad with the good.
True.
I mean, that contract doesn't exist without ramming through an unsafe farce of a series during the breakout of COVID. So you get that season in the books, it preserves that relationship, you get that contract, and hopefully it's good for the sport in the long run. And in the meantime, we get something to watch, because like when it all comes down to it, we are just rooting for laundry. But it means so much to us, Dad.
It does, because, and I guess that's a really big point to take away from this, is that all of it leads to some of the best things that we could ever experience in our lives. When you and I were down at the NFL draft, we were watching the Titans play the Patriots in the playoffs downtown. We were watching the Predators from a rooftop on Broadway. All of those things are just incredibly momentous points in our lives, and that's the trade-off. I mean, that's what we're trading in is things that change the way we live, and we're lucky to have players out there that, more so than owners, and be clear, there probably are some owners that deserve some credit for being good role models, but the players who get knocked more often than anybody else for being bad role models are really the torchbearers for showing people how to live and how to make the most of their situations. There's so many great players that are good role models, and our teams in Nashville, we're really lucky to have had a lot of great players like that. All the way back to the grit and grind Grizz, to the team that we have now with about a bunch of young players that are just model athletes and model citizens for our city, to what the Predators have been since most of their time, and certainly on this run, players that have come and gone. They've been great examples for the community, and even the players coming through with the Sounds that have go on to the major leagues and whatnot. There's players we should be really proud of that we can root for, and as much as that puts money in the pockets of the owners, it's worth it to support those guys and their growth and the impact that they make on our communities and our memories and our lives, because it's really, really great stuff.
No doubt about that, man. That's the reason we do this.
That's it.
And yeah, I mean, I've probably said this ad nauseum, you guys know, but sports are so important to me in my life. Just having this thing that can bring together anybody, regardless of your social class, regardless of your economic class, regardless of race, religion, anything, any of these invisible fake boundaries or dividers. You could have the most diehard liberal and the staunchest conservative. If they're standing next to each other wearing Titans jerseys when a touchdown's getting scored, they're high-fiving and hugging and jumping up and down and screaming next to each other. And there's so few things in life that can do that for us. It's one of the things sports are just so special. And I mean, even beyond that, I personally think that every kid should play sports growing up. Even if you hear all the talk like, I got bullied in the locker room or something. There's going to be that in every flow of life. I mean, I'm sure somebody, if you don't like in the chess club, they're going to bully that kid. That's just a point of being shitty kids.
It's a great point. It's not excusing it, but it's saying it's not any more likely necessarily. It's just a different space where it could happen.
But this confidence, this ability to interact with people that you wouldn't normally interact with through whatever social reasons, when you're teammates, that's something. I mean, we can not like somebody on our own team and we can talk shit about our teammates all you want, but then that guy across the lines on the other team talks something about your teammate, you've got that person's back. And that's something that I think is so important to learn when you're young, that there's people who will have your back. There's ways you can get out there and be a part of a team. And it's made such a big difference in my own life that I feel so strongly about the good that sports can do. Besides, the obvious physical activity, it's great for you. It is. But socially and everything else, it can be one of the greatest things. Every 4 years in the Olympics, we get together at a sports bar usually, and we're going fucking wild for a bike race.
Yeah, for sports that I don't even fully understand. I remember originally watching soccer, and you're like, all right, we're rooting for this. That's fine. Let's do it. I don't know what's going on. You're absolutely right. It's integral to everything that we do, and people, kids especially, but anybody. I mean, like, I think we emphasize kids doing it a lot, but man, if you're an adult, go do something. Go play some pickup basketball. Go join a league if you're inclined, because it creates that opportunity to network and work with people beyond the weird press context and I don't know, whatever else comes along with your job. That can bring different light and different cast different shadows on things. So go out there and just learn how to collaborate and work with people and create an atmosphere. And I guess the last thing I would say on that is, because I'm living proof of it, you don't have to be good either. You can suck at every sport that you play, which I have, which, by the way, I've also sucked at every musical instrument that I've played too.
Modest guy, this Dave.
No, I'll also say that just for all the kids listening out there, that if there's anything that is a consistent between sports and musical instruments, it's practice. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be good. So
practice.
We're talking about practice.
Yeah. We're trying to have an internet radio show. You talking about practice?
Come on, man. You don't have to be good though, and like it teaches you to lose, which I think is a really great aspect too. Which is where we should embrace teams that aren't successful too, because one of the more fun things being a sports fan is seeing your team climb out from the basement, and every team does it. Every team does it eventually, even if it's a small window.
Because why are you going to be a Yankee fan?
Don't be a Yankee fan. You're a non-human, non-entity, and nothing if you're a Yankee fan. Sorry, you don't count any of these humanistic discussions that we're having.
Oh, they could have some NUA too. Look, to cross promote a little bit, on the Culture Rot podcast, which I guested on, that came out this week, we talked about the 30 for 30 House of Steinbrenner, and seeing Yankee fans being so sad that they hadn't won a World Series in a couple of years.
Can you imagine being in that position? I remember when the century came to a close, the Yankees had won 1 out of every 4 World Series in that century. The luxury. I cannot imagine that luxury. It's there are, you know, I would love financial security. I'd love great health. I would love all these things, you know, just to know that I won't starve to death. All your basic needs, right? Like fulfill your most basic needs. I would love that. And but I would just love a championship. Like just throw me a bone every once in a while. That's it. For the teams that I love the most.
Yeah, I've never gotten to go to a championship parade for any of the teams I follow super closely, which is a bummer. But I've been to championship parades for other teams in cities I've been in, and it's been a damn good time. Again, just I will evangelize every breath, that sense of community that sports gives you. It's insane. And yeah, a car might get flipped over or a trash can lit on fire. But honestly, as long as you're out there being smart and not hurting each other and not doing anything you really shouldn't be, just that communal joy is so worth it. That release, that incredible, again, high-fiving strangers and screaming and shouting and dancing along with everybody. It's amazing. Yeah, I was in New York fairly recently with a friend who wasn't into sports much growing up, didn't do the whole scene. But they were wearing a Mets hat and was just walking down the street in New York, and somebody leans out of a car and honks and says, "Let's go Mets." And you should see the smile on her face, you know? Just, yeah, let's go Mets. Some total stranger leaning out of a car and cheering for you because you got this logo on your hat.
That's a great point.
It means something.
It's a great point. And honestly, I think that's a great thing to raise is like root for your team, but participate in other people's happiness because it's infectious, man. And it's a lot of fun. One of my favorite experiences was I was in New Orleans when the Saints won the Super Bowl. I think they were down in Tampa that year, but I was in New Orleans when that happened in the French Quarter, and just being down there. I was with a group of New Orleans fans. I love the team, but that's not my team. They were that night, and it was a blast to be high-fiving. I high-fived so many strangers that night. I shared hurricanes with people that night in celebration. It was insane, and one of the coolest experiences that I've ever had, and it's because of that familial experience. You know, it's just like when you sit down for food with people that are your family and beyond. You sit down with a big group and you break bread. There's a commonality there, and it's the same thing when you're watching sports and you're rooting for them. So take part in other people's joy, unless they're Yankees fans, of course. But really, you can take a lot from those experiences, even if your team doesn't get there. As much as we want our teams to get to that height.
And that brings us all the way back around to our other point, in that fans are so knowledgeable now. We can cheer for a losing season. You can say, all right, we can joke around with those bad years for the Titans when you were trying to, suck for Sam or tank for Tua or tank for Trevor or all these things that we hear now. There's a reason for that. It's because the name Trevor Lawrence has been in our memory as fans for so long now. Even if you didn't go to Clemson University, or even if you're not an ACC fan or even a college football fan, if you're a fan of a bad NFL team, you've been following the career of Trevor Lawrence.
For sure. For sure. And that just connects everything. I mean, that's the whole idea of the never-ending season, right? Like, it never ends. There's no gap in it. There's always a story to be told. And that's because we've connected everything as well, and we've got outlook. We act like GMs. We're not just like coaching from the couch any longer. We are managing a team and looking at the right growth pattern for the next 10 years, trading draft picks, looking at whether we need to rebuild, whether we need those top picks or whether it's just not the right time. Like, it's insane to me. And it's so fun because it leads us, like you said, to be smarter, but it also leads us to a bunch of new enterprises. Fantasy experiences are a big part of that. You were just talking about the other day. I think it's really fun, even though you know it better than I do. The new digital only sport of Blaseball. But it gives us.
Don't get me started.
I know. I kind of want to.
We're going to need a whole extra show, all right?
I think we should. But
you talk about communities. All these people are going nuts over, teams that don't exist anywhere except the internet, and a community that's been made up around them.
We can create our tribes and our groups anywhere under any situation, and that's what's fun about it. Sports are set, and the big three's like that too. There's alternatives and there's new perspectives on everything, and we should embrace them. But the one thing that'll be hard to overtake is the tradition of the teams we've rooted for decades and plus. And I don't know what happens with those. That's a whole other show too, man. I don't want to get too far down this path, but I'm really curious what happens over the next 10, 20, 50 years, even if I'm lucky enough to see that much, of sports with the diversifications of leagues, the digitalization of them, and the knowledge that we have to know that maybe some leagues that we've been with for a long time aren't the ones we want to be a part of. And that there's alternatives now rather than only one path. It's going to be a weird world. It really is.
All right. Next episode, nothing but baseball and fan control football.
I'm in, man. I'm in.
No. The tradition's a part of it too. And that's something nice, passed down from families as sports fandom sometimes. Or you pick the opposite of the one your family was, just so you can have those good-natured arguments every now and then. You don't want to talk about politics at Thanksgiving? You can argue Yankees Red Sox or something.
That's a great point. And now you get the chance to choose new teams. Like, I know plenty of people having kids who want to set a new precedent for them. And sometimes maybe that's choosing a new team for them or choosing a new league. Maybe they grow up on baseball. I don't know. It's that stuff could happen though.
I wouldn't be surprised the way it's going, man. We talked about esports.
Yeah,
we're not going to talk about it on Walk It Off ever. That's a rule. I'm sorry, man.
All right,
I'm sticking to this rule. No esports.
Which is more of a sport, esports or golf? Go, Drew.
Golf. You still get out and do something active. But yes, I know. Hand-eye coordination, quick twitch muscles, it's a talent. It is.
Hey,
But
hey, isn't baseball just all hand-eye coordination?
look,
Sorry, that was a hot take, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to make anybody mad.
but that's not ours to say. If you grow up and that next generation is just as big a fan of your NBA team's esport team as they are of the actual NBA team, good. More power to them.
A team's a
If
team,
they're,
man. Yeah,
if their biggest sports icon is a dude who sits in a chair that looks like a race car with, headphones bigger than the ones we've got on right now, good for you, man. Go for it. Buy his T-shirt. I don't care.
agreed.
Support what you like to like. Support what you like to like. It's good to always show some support, and hopefully you get that same thing from that. If you're wearing the T-shirt of your favorite Overwatch player and you're standing in line at, I don't know, Starbucks,
GameStop,
Game Stonk.
GameStonk. Oh man, are we gonna do a whole
And
episode on
somebody else sees
stonks
your
too?
T-shirts like, hey, yeah, I like that person. I hate that person. You started a conversation with a stranger, and it's worth it. It's worth it, man. And it's why we say every episode. I don't think we've gone through an episode when we're on the air without saying just how much we love the honor and the privilege of being on air talking about sports every week.
True. We're lucky, and this has been a unique year to talk about a bunch of different things. You talked about early on about how we actually try to avoid some of the negative perspectives, right? And talk about the camaraderie like we've just spent the last 10, 15 minutes talking about. But this year certainly brought up a lot of challenges in that respect. But that's part of it. Like that is the privilege, that's the luxury, the honor that you and I have is that, and I hope we do a good job of doing well by that opportunity to talk about the things that are most important and everything that's impacting it, because the truth is that it's all intertwined. Esports is being led now by actual athletes. So athletes are playing esports and they're the ones that are bringing a lot of light to it. And, everything from a political standpoint to a social justice standpoint to everything like that connects back to sports. These things are all intertwined, and that doesn't mean we should take away from the opportunity to enjoy our teams or enjoy the fun of some other team or not rib another team and not make this trivial. We should absolutely make this trivial. We should absolutely make this juvenile and fun and whatever we want to make out of it. But we should also acknowledge that everything really is connected. And that's one of the great things about sports of our time is that sports are our lives. They are our society. They are our culture. And it's pretty sweet to be able to talk about all the time. And it's one of the great optimisms that I have is being able to see the people who are torchbearers of it, the young players, the people who are setting new precedents and standards and breaking down barriers and see where they go, because this is truly going to be an indicator of our times for years to come.
Man, I was about to say that I would kill to be back on a baseball field, but I wouldn't. That's the whole reason we haven't been out on a baseball field this past year.
I know.
You don't want to kill anybody.
I know. That's why a lot of people would go to a baseball
soon.
field too, because they would kill to do that. But man, I can't wait.
So ready.
I miss it so much. Oh, I was just thinking.
So ready to be back. Right before, you talk about those special moments, man. Right before this all started, you and me, you were back in town. We went to the inaugural game for Nashville SC when they joined MLS, and cheering on our new soccer team with 60,000 of our new best friends. Special.
That was incredible.
And I want those moments back so bad. So everybody out there, be smart, take care of each other, and let's get back to this as soon as we can, because God damn it, we need it.
Well, you have our word that you and I, when it's safe and available, we'll be there, and we'll be reporting back, man. We'll be talking about all those experiences, and that's We got you covered through all the weirdness of 2020/2021, and we'll be there beyond that.
No doubt. Always good to talk to you, buddy. Good to see you too. You know, when we're socially distant and everything. Although you left Nashville, so you're distant anyway.
I know, and it's my own fault. But it's cool to bring you into my new home, and see you and stay connected to Nashville. So we're gonna have to do this a lot more often.
Hey, every week. You know, I had a bunch more topics for us to talk about on our digital episode today, but I think we might be running out of time here. Look, it's almost like it's a radio. now I got to save some of those topics for the radio, all right?
I know.
We're talking about what Titans are going to be doing in a free agency coming up. I don't know how much more time you got in you, but I think we might need to save this one for the airwaves.
I think so. The good news is there'll be a lot of developments between now and then for us to create some fodder for Sunday night. But these things are always in front of us, so look for more digital episodes from us. The world's our oyster, man. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up.
Yeah, like we said, send us your comments, your questions, topics we need to be covering on the show. Whatever. walkitoffradio@gmail.com or hit us up on social media at walkitoffradio. I know we're both pretty terrible at social media, but it's there.
It exists, so interact with us, please. Please like it and interact.
All right, that's on you. Next 5 posts are your responsibility. I'm calling it.
You're killing it, dude. And if anybody can guess, let's see if we can come up with some great prize for the person that guessed the highest percentage of whether it's a Drew or Dave post. It'd be great for y'all to figure that out.
Yeah, they're. Hey, I'll do one more thing for everybody who stuck it out this long. All right. We just got some brand new Walk It Off stickers. Send us an email. Shoot me your address. I'll send you one in the mail. Free of charge.
Boom.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for caring. Thanks for liking sports. It's always good stuff.
We'll catch you down the road.